Hi there, this is Candice Giesbrecht, and I am the Director of Talent Strategies with Teamit.com, and I am here today with one of my favorite professionals to work with, to listen to learn from, Dr. Laura Hambley. Laura, you have such a huge CV. Could you introduce yourself to anyone listening to our little conversation?
Well, CV kind of sounds boring, but I do love what I do. I'm an organizational psychologist and also a counseling psychologist by background, and I specialize in helping organizations thrive through helping the human beings within the companies to also thrive. So that's what I do. I've been doing it for 22 years now and working with all shapes and sizes of organizations and people from around the world. And that's my background.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And thanks so much for hopping on very short notice to this conversation with me. Laura, I came across this term that I hadn't heard in some time. And I thought, I feel like this is kind of an interesting conversation for us at this point in time, as many organizations and leaders are thinking about the future of work and how to retain their employees and just figure out all the mix of things that we're thinking about these days. And that term or that phrase is psychological contract. Now, as HR professionals, we know about contracts, and of course, like employment contracts or maybe collective agreements, or we sort of come across many different kinds of contracts. But this thing called a psychological contract, what is it?
So a psychological contract is inside of someone. So it's not in writing, but every single employee has a psychological agreement in place. And the easy way of saying this is they have certain expectations for what they need to give and do in their job for their employer, and in return what they will get and receive. And some of these expectations may be in writing in the actual employment contract, but others aren't. So they're more subjective. And I mean, one of them would be, I expect to be growing. I expect to be growing in my career. In return, I'll put in my time and effort into this company. So that would be an example of one that I have in my mind.
Yeah, so that's a super great example. And, as you're talking, what really occurs to me is how much of this is inside the head of the employee. Mm-hmm. And so when it's inside the head of the employee, and as you mentioned, some things may be in writing, but, for many organizations, we're in hybrid environments or we're distributed. And so those occasions to sort of find out about what is happening in people's minds they're different. And so I'm curious, just what are your reflections or thoughts about how a hybrid or virtual workplace affects, or what are some of the things we need to be thinking about in terms of a psychological contract in a hybrid working environment or virtual environment?
Well, to understand the psychological contract, it's important to understand the person and what they need and expect from work. And in order to retain talent, you need to be having open dialogue. And this is not the once in a year performance review discussion or development goal setting where you're in a rush to set these goals together. This is a real human dialogue, and you can have it just like we are on video, looking the person in the eye and not being distracted by your email or your phone. That's with a remote and hybrid. You need to be here now, and you need to be asking the questions. Candice, you've been working here for 4 years. What would make you want to work here another 4 years with myself and our team? What's going well for you, and how are you feeling about the job, the work, your growth, your progression? What would make you stay here? And then listen. That's how you start to understand what is going on inside that person and what they want and desire in their career growth with your company.
Yeah. Okay. I have so many more questions. Okay. So so contracts can be built and broken.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things that contribute to building this psychological contract, and what are some of the things that break that contract?
Oh my. So time. So giving people quality time to build the relationship. So if you can be face to face for parts of that, that's always the best. I'll say that the rest of my life. Nothing replaces face to face. However, making pockets of time like this with video on, getting to know the person, getting to know what their motivations are, and listening to those answers. So time, and then also the courage to have open dialogues when things aren't going well, to be honest with your people about the career opportunities. And if there aren't opportunities for growth, it's better to be honest with that person.
Mhm.
And they may leave, but they'll leave speaking positively about your workplace and you as a leader. And you never know when your paths will cross again. So I'm a huge believer in not everyone's going to stay, but the people that leave are important supporters of your company as well.
Yeah, they become our champions, our ambassadors, in many cases, our recruiters when they're out there. When people say,
Yes.
"Hey, you used to work with this person. What was it like?" And often I think people remember how it ended. And
Yeah.
that's the thing they'll talk about, right? So,
Yeah, and how
um,
it made them feel. They'll remember how
yeah,
you made them feel. And if they feel
totally.
heard, appreciated, and understood, then you've done a fabulous job, whether they stay or go.
Yeah. So what are some of those things that can break that psychological contract?
Breaking trust. So
Mhm.
saying that you'll do something and not doing it, which is why communicate, right? So if you don't have the answer, or you're not able to give them the promotion or the raise or send them on that course or whatever it is, be honest about it, be open, and communicate regularly. Otherwise, people make up their own stories about what's going on. And once you damage trust, it's hard to rebuild, especially remotely. It's very hard to be rebuild remotely because you
Mm.
don't have that together time and the nonverbal nuances, etc.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm an HR professional and I interact with a lot of HR professionals in a number of different sectors. But what are some of the things that an HR professional in their supportive role alongside of, leaders or business units within an organization, what are some of the things that an HR professional can do to support this idea of a healthy psychological contract? And of course, its broader impact on high performing teams.
Sure, and psychological contract. I mean, this has been around since the 80s in my field, and lots of research has gone into it. But it's not something that the layperson uses.
Yeah.
So, but I'm hearing all these other terms these days, like quiet quitting and quiet firing, and all these different things. I'm hearing some of the same concepts resurface under different names. But just to keep it simple, it's rather than psychological contract. I would like to say HR should really be encouraging leaders to have these stay
Hmm.
conversations to understand where your people are at and what would motivate them to continue to stay and do exceptional work at your organization. And a lot of leaders don't know how to have these conversations. They don't necessarily have the active listening skill set to have these
Hmm.
conversations. So the more that you can double down on leadership development, whether that's training, coaching, mentoring, communities of practice where leaders get together and practice these skills internally, the better.
Yeah, amazing. So just as a last question here, what do you recommend for frontline leaders to that they could do? Like if they were to listen to this and think, okay, I'm going to do something today that's going to help to bolster this relationship, this psychological contract with my team. What are some super tangible things that frontline leaders could do right away?
Say, I'd like to have a catch up conversation with you. I'd like to know how things are going. And just talk about what this last while has been like for you and how I can support your further growth, right? So it's about thanking them, appreciating them, and taking the time to ask what's next for them, and what they would need to continue to do well, and making the space for that conversation, because one-on-ones are often about, okay, my to-do list, my task, this project, this client, this deadline, etc. And the frontline leaders trying to enable like support, etc. But that's all task focused. We need the human focus as well as the task focus.
Laura, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all of your thought leadership. You are making people and leaders and organizations better all the time, and I'm privileged that I just get to be one of those. So thank you so much for all of this and for all you do.
Thanks for all that you do, Candace. You do exceptional work, and the world is lucky to have you.
Aw, thanks so much.